YouTube channel, which I'm setting up that recording right now. So if you ever miss one of these, you can always watch it live on the YouTube. But yeah, you miss the live experience. Watching live, it's like a sporting event. It's more fun that way. And let me get that going. All right. All right. And so if you do have questions, feel free to go ahead and put those questions in the question and answer section. I already have one question submitted in our Q&A section, and then I have a bunch of questions already submitted ahead of time, so I appreciate that. And what I'm going to do is go ahead and share my screen. And I always like to start with a positive focus, something positive that happened over the last week. For me, my positive focus is that I started coaching my kids' soccer games, or my soccer teams. My son, Ryan, he's 11. My daughter, Madison, is 8. And my daughter just had her first soccer practice yesterday, which she said she had a good time. And then my son, I'm coaching tonight. So I'm pretty excited with that. And also coaching with my dad, who is my coach. So it's kind of fun. It's generations of soccer coaching and playing. So that's my positive focus. And then the weather is probably everyone's positive focus as well. The weather's super nice here in Michigan. With that, let me share my screen. All right, so we do these every week. This is general information if you want to see how it applies to your situation. As always, make sure to schedule some time on my calendar to figure out how this all applies to you. But that said, let's get into the questions. Let me move this to over here. All right, and we'll get started. So the first question, I'm 71 on Social Security with a small savings. Will Medicaid pay for my long-term care? Well, again, Medicaid is a governmental program, and I just got off the phone with a son, his dad, has been dealing with dementia, gotten to the point where he just went into the hospital, and now he's going to need long-term care in a nursing home. And we set up a Castle Trust 5 years ago, and he has about 17 days left before he makes it past the 5-year look-back period for Medicaid. But he will be able to receive nursing home care at $8,000 to $12,000 a month, all covered by Medicaid, because we set things up properly. He has a farm and some assets, but with Medicaid, to qualify for Medicaid, you can only have $2,000 worth of countable. Why is this being weird? $2,000 worth of countable assets. Countable assets are everything other than a home, small cash value of life insurance, personal belongings, so your stuff, prepaid funeral, and an automobile. I don't know why I'm drawing all these. My kids would not be impressed with my drawing skills. But your house, personal items, car, prepaid funeral, everything, and then $2,000 worth of assets. Everything else would be a countable asset. So if you really don't have much in terms of savings, and you have less than $2,000 at the end of the day, or if you're able to spend down to that $2,000 limit without any pre-planning, then you could have Medicaid step up and pay that cost of care potentially. Medicaid for a nursing home doesn't have any type of income test, so the amount of your Social Security or that doesn't matter. Really, with Medicaid, it's all about the asset test, where you can only have $2,000 worth of countable assets. So if you don't have much in savings, Medicaid might be an option. Otherwise, you'd have to either really plan ahead, or we could do Medicaid crisis planning if you did have extra assets to plan for. Number 2, fixed index annuity and IUL are 2 vehicles that protect against downside risk. And the reason you know this is they have the I. That means it's tied to the index. So if we have money in the market, understand the market kind of goes like this. If we have money in something that's tied to the index, typically it means it has downside protection, where the growth will go like this. If the market goes up, you get the upside of the market. The market goes down, you stay where you're at. The market goes up, you get the upside again. If the market goes, whoops, I don't know why that's curved. The market goes down or stays the same, you stay where you're at. So that's where a lot of people, especially given the fact we've been on a 12-year bull run, a lot of people are concerned with the pandemic and the economy. They might want to move some of the money off of kind of the roller coaster of the ups and downs in the market to something that offers some downside protection, plus gives you an opportunity for growth. And that's where we get into fixed index annuities and IUL, Index Universal Life. Two different tools. And again, we like to first focus on strategy or goals, then strategy, then tools. But a lot of people ask about specific tools because they're don't have as much experience with these. They're more experienced with all the tools we typically use in accumulation, investing in the market and stocks and bonds and equities and that type of thing. But as you get near retirement, or if you're concerned about where the market's going, you might still want growth, but downside protection. That's where things like FIAs, fixed index annuities, IULs come into play. So the question is, what about whole life? So whole life is another form of permanent insurance. And there's different types of insurance. There's also what's called term insurance. And we had a question about term insurance as well. The cheapest death benefit typically you're ever going to buy is term insurance. So I see some people say, well, my kids are adults, I paid off my mortgage, I don't need insurance anymore. Typically what they're talking about is term insurance. Like my kids are young, God forbid I pass away, I have term insurance, I have a lot of death benefit to cover that. But then I was sitting with a client the other day and he's like, I don't have any need for insurance. And when you're older, near retirement, you might not have a need for insurance, but there might be a good reason why you might want to look at insurance. One is with IUL, we're using section 7702, where now there is a piece of it that's geared towards the insurance component. We call that the mortality expense, which also could be a long-term care benefit, but really we're just utilizing the insurance piece to sneak in our cash accumulation, our investments, so it grows tax-free. So that IUL a lot of times is set up for tax-free retirement income. Whole life is, I would not say, is a tool that we would use the same way as a fixed index annuity or IUL. Whole life is more of a permanent insurance, where if we're looking at more of a legacy play, then maybe a tax-free retirement income. If we're looking at like leaving more to the next generation tax-free, then we might look at IUL or whole life. Both of them are permanent death benefits. If we're looking at this more as I might want tax-free income in retirement and a death benefit, then we'd lean more towards IUL. But again, it's all about, I keep going back to this, but first it's, what is your goal? Then let's figure out the strategy and then pick the tool. So whole life, we would only use that in really a straight permanent death benefit, more of a legacy play, where instead of leaving our kids $100,000, we could leave them $200,000 tax-free. We can also do that with IUL. IUL has some different options. And then I had a question about converting from term insurance. So if you've been paying for term insurance and now you figure out that maybe you don't want to keep paying for that, what are your options? Depending on the term insurance policy, it might be able to convert to, you might be able to convert the term to permanent life, depending on how you set up that term insurance. But typically, once you stop paying for the term, that insurance is gone. And that's kind of one of the downsides of term insurance, is it is cheaper, but once you stop paying for it or you're outside that term, the insurance just disappears. You don't have anything to show for it. So you can't really convert term insurance to a IUL or FIA. You can convert term insurance, depending on how it's set up, to a whole life, but only if your term insurance policy has like a rider that allows you to do that. Your only other option is look at, okay, if I'm paying $500 a year or $1,000 a year to term insurance, I stop paying that, and now I invest that somewhere else, maybe into whole life or IUL or something else. Okay. So it's kind of an advanced topic, looking at different ways of using insurance. But it is interesting because it can provide more bang for your buck depending on what your goals are. Number 3, Did a revocable living trust in 2015. Does a castle trust make sense now if I'm concerned about long-term care for myself or a spouse? So I have a lot of clients, when they come in, they have a revocable living trust. Because it's very basic. Revocable living trust can avoid probate, control the distribution upon death. Any estate planning attorney can do it. The way that we set them up, a lot of times we build in additional benefits where we build in the opportunity for a lifetime of asset protection for the beneficiaries. You don't see that in any all revocable living trusts. But the question is, all right, does a castle trust make sense? And again, it ends up, I hate to keep banging this drum, but it's what is your goal? Then let's pick the strategy and then choose the right tool. So what the castle trust does is protect against long-term care costs and lawsuits, right? As well as avoid probate and control the distribution upon death. Now, why doesn't everyone have a castle trust or an asset protection trust? What are the downsides, and why didn't we do it originally if we met in 2015? First of all, the investment, it's more of an investment because it's a more complicated trust. So we have to weigh the value of that. And then also understand that the trust only protects assets that are in the trust. So if we have this castle trust, understand it's protecting only assets that are in the trust. So that would be things like real estate. I met with the client today. They're moving forward with a castle trust. They had 2 pieces of real estate, and then they had some non-qualified money. Or I just got off a call with someone who reached out to us. They have a home. He's 73, has about $800,000 of post-tax money, and he's concerned about long-term care. Castle trust makes a lot of sense. We move all the assets into the trust, and then that starts this 5-year race where now we can make it 5 years before everything inside of the trust is protected from that nursing home or Medicaid spend down, right? But what can't go in the trust, and we've talked about this, is your IRA money, like that pre-tax money. You haven't paid any income tax. So what we have to do is we have to, and a lot of times this makes sense because most people think taxes are going up. We have to pay the tax, which we've been recommending just from tax planning standpoint, where tax laws are and the change in presidency and the pandemic and the deficit. But we have to pay the tax to move the money, and then we can invest it in the trust. So why you might not want the castle trust is A, you're not willing to pay for the protection it offers, or B, you're not willing to pay tax. And I'm not saying do it all at once, but pay tax over time on the IRA money. Now, for a lot of people, this makes a lot of sense just because taxes are going up. I'd rather pay a 22% tax now than a 25% tax in the future. So yeah, if your goal is protection from long-term care, then typically a castle trust is going to make more sense than a basic revocable trust. Number 4, is the estate and inheritance tax the same? The answer is yes. These are synonymous. They mean the same thing. So you might hear it called the death tax, the inheritance tax, or the estate tax. And this is a number of years ago, maybe 6 years ago. I actually had another lawyer get a little upset at me because I referenced the estate tax or inheritance tax as a death tax. Somehow that might have political connotations. I'm not sure what those are, but typically we hear the estate tax, inheritance tax, or death tax. It all basically means the same thing. It's another tax when you pass away. And right now, the estate tax exemption is at $11 million adjusted for inflation. Then when the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act expires, which is scheduled for 2025 and could be sooner, then it's going to drop down to $5 million. And then Biden's tax proposal, and this is also part of Bernie Sanders' proposal, is to lower it even further to $3.5 million. So what this means is adding up the value of any IRAs, any Roth IRAs, which are income tax free but not estate tax free, any real estate, any life insurance that's not handled properly, maybe inside of an irrevocable life insurance trust, all of this, add all up add up all the value of everything, that's going to be your estate tax value or your estate value at death. And right now, if it's greater than $11 million, you have an estate tax issue. When the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act drops to 5 million, anything greater than 5 million will be taxed up to 45%. And then if the Biden-Sanders plan goes through, then that's going to drop even further to 3.5 million. So now if you have greater than $3.5 million of assets, anything over this amount could be taxed, maybe up to 45%. So this is where we need to think about other planning strategies, which dovetails nicely into my next question. I organized that well, is that we might want to carve out this overage in assets. Maybe it goes to irrevocable life insurance trust, where we can remove life insurance from your estate. Or depending on the type of assets, we can set up what's called a family inheritance trust, which is different than a legacy trust. A FIT or family inheritance trust is an irrevocable trust that removes the money from your estate. You cannot be the beneficiary of it anymore. You can manage it, but you cannot be the beneficiary anymore. Instead, the beneficiary would be the kids. But instead of giving it outright to the kids, now it could be held in trust that you could still manage while you're alive and well. And then upon death, it's removed from your estate and can go to your kids. That's different than our family legacy trust. Family legacy trust is a revocable trust that's in your name. You can make changes to it, but then upon death, the way it goes to the kids is it's held in trust for their benefit upon death. But you're in control while you're alive. You can remove assets, that type of thing. Versus the family inheritance trust, and I apologize, we use all these different acronyms. This is while you're alive and well, you're moving money into an irrevocable trust that you can manage, but now the real beneficiary would be, say, the kids. So it's a way to manage, take some amount of money that might be subject to estate taxes, remove it from your estate, but you can still manage it, but you cannot take the money out and put it back in your name. You're really removing it from your control, okay? But the advantage is now that it's protected from the estate tax question, okay? And so if you have more than $3.5 million, you might want to look at a family inheritance trust or irrevocable life insurance trust to remove some of this money that is over the estate tax exemption. All right, moving on. Number 6. According to something from Northwestern Mutual, all withdrawal rates are from insurance are taxable based on the basis of the policy. Is the cash value of life insurance taxable or no? And so one of the big things I always caution people, especially my engineering clients out there, is be careful what you read from the internet. Be careful where you do your research. In fact, I have a mug in my other office in our conference room that says your Google search does not trump my law degree. So there's a ton of information out there. A lot of times my job as an attorney and advisor is to cut through all the BS out there and figure out what really applies to your situation. Because otherwise we're going to go down these rabbit holes where, okay, here's the general rule, but that Northwestern Mutual piece doesn't talk about all the different exceptions or how it applies to your situation. And again, this is kind of getting into where are you going for advice, right? And so there's a lot of vendors out there where this is where kind of do-it-yourselfers go and they pick out what they want, right? So if you look at building a house, you go to Home Depot and you just start buying lumber and stuff. And then you got to figure out how to be the architect and put everything together. Home Depot will sell you whatever you want. There's a lot of vendors out there like Vanguards or Northwestern Mutuals of the world where go to them for life insurance, or they'll have someone help you buy the right life insurance, because that's what Northwestern Mutual is. They're a life insurance company. They're going to sell you life insurance. Now they might put it together as part of some other type of like kind of overall quote unquote comprehensive plan, but at the end of the day, they're not fiduciaries. They don't owe you they don't have to act in your best interest. They're just going to sell you something. And there's even attorneys, I would say, are vendors, where every person that walks in their office gets the same basic revocable living trust. You're buying a revocable living trust that looks the same as everyone else's. Versus what we do in the legal world is we have different options based on, again, what are your goals? Let's pick the strategy and then the tools. Similar with investments, we're doing the same thing from an investment standpoint. So yeah, vendors, they're going to provide some general information, and then it's up to you as the do-it-yourselfer to figure out, okay, is that the right information? Does that apply to me? Is that in my best interest? And then kind of second level of people out there in the financial world are just investment professionals, where they're going to put together a portfolio or sell you some stocks that may or may not be in your best interest. Okay. And they might give you some advice, but a lot of times they're still working in what's called a broker dealer relationship, where they're selling you stocks, they're selling you mutual funds, versus true holistic planning, where we're taking a look at everything and all of it is in your best interest. And this is where we are, and we're not the only people here, but just understand where you're getting your advice from. All right. So now that was a long-winded setup for the Northwestern Mutual. Is the money you take out of the cash value life insurance taxable or no? Depends on how the insurance is set up. Depending on how that permanent insurance is set up. Typically, when we're setting up IULs for clients, we set it up so that the money you pull out of there, whether it's through loans or however you take the money out, is not taxable. That's one of the goals, typically, of setting up an IUL, is to have tax-free income. So depending on how you set up the insurance policy will depend on whether the proceeds of that will be taxable or not. But typically, if our goal is tax-free income, then we're going to set up the insurance policy so anything you pull out of it will be tax-free income as well as a tax-free death benefit. A couple questions came in. Is moving money to a FIT subject to gift tax? So getting back to this, the estate tax is tied to the gift tax. So it's a unified credit. So if you were to gift $4 million to a FIT and you have $11 million estate tax exemption, well, that's going to cut into your $11 million estate tax exemption because it's a unified credit. And this is something we talked about before, is with understanding that the estate tax exemption is going away, the IRS has said that if we gift a portion now and then the estate tax exemption drops, this money that we've gifted will not factor into this lower estate tax. So we have this unique opportunity right now where the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act is still going on to make gifts to special types of trusts where it will not play a role in the future with regards to your estate taxes. The next question, are educational savings plans included in taxable estates? I'll have to double check that. My initial reaction is yes, because you're still technically the owner, even though you've appointed a beneficiary. You're the one managing it. But I'd have to double check that. That I don't know off the top of my head. So like a 529, I would think it would be countable in terms of your estate, but I'd have to double check that. All right, so that's 6. Do you have actual values over the last 10 to 20 years of how IUL or FIA performed? Your chart last week seemed generous since the S&P was 5.9% for the last 20 years. So I kind of summarized this question. But again, I'm not going to get too much into this, but I will share, let me share a screen. This is an actual policy that shows how it's done, how it would have done over the last 12 years. So, and again, past performance doesn't always equal how things will do in the future. But by taking out those downsides, this is where index products can really shine. So especially when you had your 2002, 2012s, 2002s, 2008s, if we can take out those downsides, you're going to see how it can really provide some value over time. This shows how basically 130,000 would have, or 121,000 would have performed over the last 12 years based on the illustration of just repeating the last 12 years in terms of the market. So with this product, and again, I hesitate to talk tools too much, but if you look at the rate of return each year, this is pretty good for something that has downside protection. Now there's some bells and whistles involved in this. This is a fixed index annuity, but you see over the last 12 years, this would have generated over 7% rate of return. So by taking out the downsides, we can perform similarly, if not better sometimes than the market with index products. Now, again, I'm not saying everything should go into something like that, but it is just another tool depending on what your goals are. And then, so that was all the questions I had ahead of time. Angela wrote in a question. And please submit any other questions or anything else you want clarification on, because I went through everything pretty darn quickly today. So what is the time limit of filing a will after death? Where should it be filed? Should that be filed before death? Is there a way for a sibling to hide the will? And if yes, what is the procedure to uncover a will? So when we talk about planning upon death, there's really two main tools that we use, a trust or a will. A will is instructions to a probate court. So typically we want to avoid probate, so we rely on a trust. A trust does not have to be recorded at probate court or anything like that. It doesn't have to be filed at the court. It's a private document. You do have to notify beneficiaries if they are named beneficiary of a trust when they pass away, and they're entitled to understand what they're a beneficiary of. But with a will, technically what's supposed to happen is that a will should be recorded at the probate court upon death, because now it's public knowledge. And if a probate is to be opened, it should be opened relatively soon, typically within a couple months. But again, a will gives instructions to the probate court. And if you're looking to avoid probate, you're not going to want to rely on a will. You're going to want to rely most likely on a trust. Is there a way for a sibling to hide the will? And if yes, what is the procedure to uncover the will? Again, a will is instructions to probate court. A will, probate court is public. For example, if you wanted to check on Michael Jackson's will or Kobe Bryant's will, you can actually find that by going to the court records. Now, what's in the trust, that's private. The only way a sibling would find out about that trust would be if they're a named beneficiary. If they're not a beneficiary, then they're not entitled to what's in a trust, versus anyone can figure out what's in a will once the will is recorded at probate court. But again, typically a will is only recorded if there's assets going through probate, and in which case it's going to be a public court process. So anyone, not just a sibling, but anyone can see what's going on in the will. That's another reason why a lot of people lean towards trust-based estate plans versus wills, because trusts are public. All right. Any other questions that you have? If you do have questions, please make sure to submit them real quick, because I went through everything. If you don't have questions, that's great. You can go out and enjoy some of the nice weather. I'm going to enjoy some soccer coaching tonight. I think it's supposed to be 80. Thanks. You're welcome. My pleasure. I always enjoy doing this. All right. Looks like that's all the questions for this week. Tony writes in, thank you. You are very welcome. So again, we do these every week. They're really dependent on whatever questions you have. I look forward to seeing everyone next week. Please make sure to share this so we can get more people on. I always appreciate the questions. So thank you so much. Take care, everyone. Make it a great week.